and welcome to today's lesson. I'm Mrs. Doble. Today, we will explore where plants get the matter they need for growth. Are you ready? Grab your pencil and your science journal, and let's get started. We've been learning a lot about a tree's role in an ecosystem. So far, we've learned a lot about the mangrove tree and different organisms in the mangrove tree ecosystem. Today, we will discuss a very different type of tree, a sequoia tree. Sequoias are the world's tallest trees. They grow nearly 100 yards tall. But how tall is 100 yards? It's the same as a football field. How long do you think it would take you to run from one end to the other? What if you had to climb the same distance? Can you imagine being that high up in the sky? Do you see the person at the bottom of the photograph? Take a moment to compare the immense size of a sequoia to the size of the person. Wow, those are really big trees. These are sequoia cones. These cones contain the seeds of the sequoia tree. Notice that the size of the cones is very different from the size of the trees. The trees are huge compared with the cones. When I look at the sequoia trees and the sequoia cones and seeds, I wonder, how does something so small grow to be so big? Take a moment to think about how a seed becomes a tree. Where do you think plants get the matter they need for growth? Did you say plants need water and sunlight? What about soil and air? These all sound like possible sources of plant matter. Let's add them to a list. Do you think there is anything we can eliminate from this list? Let's think. Sources of plant matter must also be made of matter. Water and soil are made of matter, and we learned in our last module that air is made of matter too. But what about sunlight? Is it made of matter? Think back to what we learned about air. Air is made of tiny bits of matter called particles that have mass. Even though these particles are too small to see, they can fill a balloon. Do you think we can weigh sunlight or use sunlight to fill a balloon? No, right? The sun is a source of light and heat, which means sunlight isn't matter, it's energy. That means sunlight can't be a source of plant matter, so let's take it off our list. Now our list indicates water, soil, and air as possible sources of plant matter. Which of these do you think can transform sequoia seeds into sequoia saplings and eventually full-size sequoia trees? How can we determine which of these three sources plants actually use for growth? One of your tasks after this lesson is to make a claim about which source or combination of sources you think plants use for growth. And once you've made a claim, you'll need a way to test that claim. In order for us to get reliable results, we need to make sure the tests we use are fair. But what does it mean to have a fair test? And how will we know if our test is fair? Let's step away from our plants for a moment and consider the case of the two bouncing balls. Let's use a table tennis ball and a tennis ball to help us better understand the criteria for a fair test. Which ball do you think will bounce higher? Let's take a look at an investigation. One person drops the table tennis ball from a height of 1 meter onto a desk. And another person drops the tennis ball from a height of 2 meters onto a soft rug on the floor. Can we use this test to determine which ball bounces higher? I don't think so. This test isn't fair. There are too many differences between the way we dropped the table tennis ball and the way we dropped the tennis ball. We call these differences variables. In science, a variable is any condition or factor in an investigation that can change. In a fair test, we should have only one variable that changes. We should keep all other variables the same. Let's count all the variables in our investigation. We had 2 different types of balls, so that's one variable right there. We dropped the table tennis ball from a height of 1 meter, but we dropped the tennis ball from a height of 2 meters. That's a second variable. Furthermore, we dropped the table tennis ball onto a desk, but we dropped the tennis ball onto a soft rug on the floor, which is variable number 3. And finally, we allowed 2 different people to drop the ball. That's 4 variables. This was not a fair test. There were too many variables. We know we are testing 2 types of balls, a table tennis ball and a tennis ball. That means that the type of ball is our variable. Remember, a fair test should only have 1 variable. So let's get rid of all of the other variables. We will have 1 person drop the ball from the same height onto the same surface. Now, do you think we can test which type of ball bounces higher when dropped? I think so. Here are our fair test criteria. I can't wait to see what happens. Can you? That was a fun investigation. Our test proved that a table tennis ball bounces higher than a tennis ball when dropped from a height of 1 meter onto a desk. And we can be confident in our results because we know we set up a fair test. But how can we apply what we learned about creating a fair test to our plant matter investigation? Remember, we are trying to figure out how plants grow from itty-bitty seeds into towering sequoias. And we know that there are 3 possible sources of plant matter: water, soil, and air. These sources of plant matter will serve as our variables. One of your tasks after this lesson is to fill out these variables on a variables chart. How will you test to see if a plant uses water for matter? What about soil? And what about air? And wait a minute, why are there 4 plants if we're only testing 3 variables? Well, that's a great question. In order to test our variables, we need what's called a control. The control plant will get all the possible sources of matter: water, soil, and air. We can expect the control to grow normally, so it gives us something to compare other plants to. Of course, we can't grow a sequoia tree. That takes hundreds of years to grow, and they're much too big to grow in a classroom or at home. So we will use green onion plants instead. Green onion plants are much smaller and grow much faster. As you design your investigation, ask yourself some questions. What do you think is the source of plant matter? Soil, water, or air? Or some combination? How will you test your claim? What are some variables that might affect plant growth? And how will you keep the variables constant? Your last task at the end of this lesson will be to brainstorm an investigation plan to help you identify the source of plant matter. Wow, designing fair investigations isn't easy, but if we can determine the source of plant matter, we can learn how plants grow. We can figure out how a seed becomes a tree, such as a sequoia tree or a mangrove tree, and we will be one step closer to understanding how a tree can support so much life. Let's review your tasks for today. First, make an initial claim about the investigation question. Next, complete the variables chart. Finally, brainstorm an investigation plan to gather evidence to answer the question.